We are now live.
Thank you. All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our town board meeting of Tuesday, December 13th, 2022. And it is actually our last town board meeting of the year. So can I have a motion to open the town board meeting?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Right, we're gonna start with any announcements. Jill, anything from you?
I have an administrator's report, so do you want that now or you want that after you? Just have a couple things.
Yeah, go ahead, go for it.
Okay. So last Friday, Chief Carroll and I attended Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's press conference about railroad safety. We're so thankful to Senator Schumer for his leadership on the issue and specifically for his support of the elimination of the grade crossing at Roaringbrook Road and Sawmill Parkway Exchange. Winter 2022-2023 has arrived, so please be advised that there is no parking on town roads from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. through April. This is so our plow drivers can clear the roads effectively. If your car is parked on the street during those overnight hours, you may be ticketed. And if you're leaving your car overnight at the commuter train station, there are assigned designated areas you must park. Down by the old skateboard park, and the triangle adjacent to Town Hall parking lot, the basketball court. And parking season for 2022-2023 starts December 15th. If you have not already renewed for the new year, please contact the town clerk's office. And our next meeting is January 3rd. We're gonna start with an organizational meeting. And we just wish everybody a wonderful holiday. And last but not least, a shout out to the Historical Society for their warm welcome to town staff to see their train show. We thoroughly enjoyed it. It was really wonderful. So if you haven't gotten to see it, go take a ride over there. It's wonderful. Thanks.
Alright, thank you. Alright, I don't have much for, I'm gonna save my supervisor's report for the written report. If you don't yet get it, please go to the town website and subscribe. There's always important information in there. Really quickly, some community corner birthdays to announce. We have a happy 4th birthday to Logan Marmon. Happy birthday to Delia Terry. Happy 10th birthday to Mackenzie Jacobs. Happy birthday to Bernardo Palomera, and happy 71st birthday to Kasum Sharma. So look for your birthday wishes on the electronic sign. The town of Newcastle and only the town of Newcastle wish you a very, very happy birthday. Also earlier, today, I was Jill kind of preempted me. I did wanna also thank Senator Schumer. This is something, building a bridge over the railroad overpass is something we have been talking about for years and years, and to finally have the support and hopefully the funds to get this done, it really truly exciting. I think it will really help with the safety of not only those who use that crossing, that east-west crossing every day, as well as those who frequent Chappaqua Crossing, but also our many, many young drivers who go to the high school every day. It would really be something that will help keep them all safe. So this is very exciting. Alright, so I think we are gonna move very quickly to a discussion, a little airport discussion. I have Robert Fleischer here, who is the head of our what are you the head of? You're not our airport advisory committee, you're the
I'm a representative
our
to the Airport
representative on
Advisory
the
Board.
Airport Advisory Board with the county. So just very quick update.
So right now at the county, the master plan is continuing to be worked on by their consultant. The first thing that will be coming out from the consultants are the projections for passenger usage over the next decade or so, as well as airplane usage. That's on the commercial side, things that are done out of the main terminal. They're also going to be making projections about general aviation, which is about 85% of the activity there. And it'll be interesting to see how that exactly works out. The county was asked about exactly what they expect to see from there, and they didn't have a great answer right now, but we're looking forward to seeing what that's gonna be. There's also I'm gonna skip that. The other part I think that's interesting, there's still a number of lawsuits going on in connection with the airport. The county is part of a larger class action suit against the PFAS, which are the forever chemicals they used in firefighting that were found to have contaminated lots of airports. And that suit goes on, I think it's down somewhere in one of the southern states, and they tried to get it dismissed, and it's staying on, and the county continues to kind of push forward there to try and get some of the expenses covered for the remediation they're doing at the airport. The county is continuing to litigate with Millionaire, who feels that they have a right to build a second big hangar for 80,000 square feet. That one continues to go on as well. The county, I think Discovery's gonna go through the beginning part of next year, and hopefully the county is not going to settle with them in a way that'll lead to any kind of building of any kind of second large terminal. The other lawsuits that are going on are for a number of I'll call them private operators who are trying to use the FBOs as basically the main terminal. So they're basically selling individual seats, for multiple seats, 50-seat plane, and flying out of the FBOs instead of using the main terminal, which they're supposed to. And that continues to be litigated in court as well. And those are all important to do because that one especially, because if the county were to lose that, then controlling traffic at the main terminal wouldn't mean much if anybody could use an FBO to fly a 50 to 75 person flight to wherever they want. So that's what's happening in terms of with the airport. The last AAB meeting of the year is tomorrow, and we'll be voting on trying to send a letter to the county that expresses the AAB's opinion that they should not move forward with the Millionaire proposal as well. And the resolution, do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to?
Sure, so I know that you helped us to draft a resolution when this town board adopted a resolution in support of the Clean Water, Clean Air, Green Jobs Environmental Bond Act of 2022. One of the issues that I know you pointed out and we agreed was that expansion of the airport and issues around the airport do not necessarily reflect clean water, clean air issues, environmental issues. So we spoke at that time about adopting a resolution that stated that. And I know you helped, you worked with Ed to help craft this for us, so we have that before us now. The board has looked at it. One change that we discussed as a board to put in there was on the last clause here, when we say through all other legal means at their disposal, we'd like to change that to through all other reasonable legal or other means at their disposal. Otherwise, if anyone has any thoughts on the board about this resolution, we can discuss that now.
Look, I think it made a lot of sense. I understood you wanted to separate the two issues before and make sure the Bond Act got passed. But I think, as I said, as you just mentioned, that Bond Act and the Environmental Bond Act and the idea of doing anything to expand operations at the airport totally conflict with each other. And I think it's important that both the county executive and the county administration and the Board of Legislatures understands that that's how towns feel. I think you'll see similar resolutions coming out of other towns after this or during this next cycle. I'm not sure how many have meetings left in December, but you probably see some of them come out during the month of January.
Yeah, and certainly my thought is I'm meeting with all the supervisors on next week in Westchester and Putnam, so I'm gonna give them a copy of this resolution as well, so they can see what we've hopefully adopt tonight and hopefully adopt similar resolutions as well.
That'd be great. Okay.
Thanks for your help, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, thank you,
Right,
Rob.
thank you.
Anyone have any other questions or statement on this with that change?
No, I think that change really provides the brakes possibly for any future situations that we can't foresee at this time, so
I support it as well.
Agreed. Okay, great. All right, so now we are going to turn without further ado to our exciting presentation on our natural resource inventory.
Dennis, take it away.
Take it away. Hi Dennis.
Hello. Good evening. Thank you
Hi,
very
Dennis.
much. If you don't mind, I just want to pause, and if you're out there watching, the New York State DEC project manager, she came down not feeling great, and so, but she said she was gonna tune in, so I just wanted to thank her. Because, you know, we definitely wouldn't get to where we are now without her support, and review of the document and data provided, et cetera, so thank you, Ingrid Hagel.
Please introduce yourself to
I will.
everybody.
So do you wanna introduce yourself to those who may not know you, both here and who are watching?
Sitting watching a number of these, I'll start for the record. I am Dennis Corelli, the environmental coordinator of Newcastle. I also affectionately refer to myself as the Lorax. So I think the place to start is, you know, I didn't come on until 2019, and I know in 2017, the town had developed a comprehensive plan. And goal 16 of that comprehensive plan was to, it says, index that inventories and maps different flora and fauna as well as their respective habitats. So I know that this was on the town's radar at, when I had started. In early, and I mean early 2020, I believe in January, a member of DEC's Hudson River Estuary Program staff came to meet with us in the Conservation Board, and there was momentum and everybody was gung-ho, which of course hit the wall that created the rest of 2020, so that was a lost year. So in 2021, when we had the opportunity to apply, the town board in April passed a resolution which allowed us to apply and committed to matching funds ranging between $1,575 and $7,500, which was part of the requirement in the grant application. So we ultimately submitted that grant application, and concurrently with that, I developed a request for proposal so that I could solicit responses from consultants, so that if we did indeed receive the grant, then we would be prepared to sort of hit the ground running and have one selected and kind of move in that direction. So in October of last year, we were approved and received a grant of just over $36,000 to complete the NRI. And then in December of last year, on the 14th, it's like a year ago, wow. We hired Mad Scientist Associates LLC for the cost of $39,251, and the total match cost to the town was $9,285, and subtracting the $5,567 allotted for in-kind services, so the responsibility to the consultant from the town was $3,718. So as the final step of the grant program and to fulfill the grant is the final presentation of the final NRI and hopefully the adoption of the resolution by the town board that this would serve as the town's natural resources inventory. Personally, you know, going through this whole process, I'm pleased with not only how it turned out, but as I had said, I know last year when there was consideration for hiring Mad, I really felt their RFP spoke to a value add, and you know, not just sort of like a lack of a better word, a regurgitation of mapping and data, but you know, was able to access other databases and tie in even more than you know what would just be garnered from you know going to a resource or a public repository. And I think DEC's program supplemented additional data nicely that we didn't even have access to. And I really think that you know you've developed what I'll call like a robust baseline, a first step, if you will, because I know people are you know obviously curious. Well, you know, so what do we do with this document? What does it mean? That's really up to all of us. I think it could serve a number of purposes, and one item that I think is very timely is that, you know, I think it was the prior meeting you established, passed a resolution for the open space fund. So obviously there's gonna be steps in that process which are gonna require justification as to why we should, what spend on, why is it necessary to pursue this property, this land, this area of town. And I feel a document like this helps to create, I kind of like use the analogy of like this Venn diagram of like, how many intersecting points we could achieve in the circle in terms of resources that really show, what a value add is if that we're able to, preserve a certain property, restore a certain property, or, areas of town. So to speak specifically to the document, I'm gonna just now carry it and take it over to Dr. Nick Smeek of Mad Scientist, who has a slide presentation that he's gonna go through, and then we of course invite any discussion or questions on your behalf. And again, thank you very much. I'm very happy with this turned out, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have a great company name.
Thank you.
Add it up.
So my name's Nick Smink. I am the Mad Scientist. Well, not really. That's our owner. It's actually his initials. His already came up with Mad Scientist, but it just works on so many levels. So we love it. And I am part of the ecological consulting firm that was brought on to work with Dennis and other members of the town to develop and draft this natural resources inventory. This presentation isn't going to cover the entire document. It's a large document. It's meant to kind of provide an overview of what is included in it, and then some ways that it may be able to be used and applied by the town. So next slide, please. This wouldn't have been able to be accomplished without the support of a number of members of the town, as well as a number of members of other town boards, who are listed on this slide, as well as Dennis said, the funding that was made available by the Hudson River Estuary Program and the Department of Environmental Conservation. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start talking about a little bit just about what a natural resources inventory is. Again, you all have probably heard this at some point or read it as the town was going through the process of trying to get the grant, as well as bringing us on board. But essentially, what a natural resources inventory is a compilation of information from a town or region that entails a couple of components. One of those components is maps. So one of the big things that came out of this NRI is maps, maps that have quite a bit of information about natural resources within the town. It also provides associated data, sources, and descriptions of those maps and the data that's used to compile those maps. And then a comprehensive report that has been provided to the town. I think each of you should have a copy in front of you, but it's also going to be made more readily available. Next slide, please. What is the purpose of a natural resources inventory? So essentially it's to provide a foundation, as Dennis said, a foundation for the development of comprehensive land use and conservation planning within a town or a region. It's also meant to kind of support the inclusion of natural resources more broadly into things like local zoning and planning. So it can have a lot of applications for many of the other boards that are involved with the town. As well as kind of the development of things like zoning and regulation moving forward to protect and consider natural resources. Next slide, please. So specifically the goals of the town of Newcastle's natural resources inventory were to identify environmentally sensitive areas. So this includes things like steep slopes, streams, floodplains, wetlands, wildlife habitat, among other things. Characterize areas of high biodiversity for wildlife species and their habitats that they require to thrive. We also were trying to measure community participation in community science and volunteer efforts, so that's a component of this. Determine community interest in preserving and expanding natural resources within the towns. There was an outreach component of the development of this that involved a survey of the town, which I'll address in a little bit more detail coming up. Provide information to promote the development, zoning and land use that promotes natural resources conservation within the town. And then also to provide a baseline against which to measure changes through time. So while this is right now is one document, it's meant to be kind of an evolving document that can be approached again, say in 10 years to say, okay, how are we doing? Do we still have the amount of wetlands that we thought we had on the landscape 10 years ago? Do we still have the amount of forest? Are we accomplishing the goals that we set based on the original natural resources inventory? Next slide, please. And at a regional scale, it also kind of starts to fill in this puzzle piece. It represents this puzzle piece of what's occurring at more kind of a regional and local scale with surrounding municipalities. So areas like Bedford, Mount Kisco, North Castle have already developed natural resources inventory plans for their communities. To the south, Mount Pleasant and Pleasantville are currently undertaking an effort to develop their own natural resources inventories. And Croton-on-Hudson also has at least developed maps that represent the information that's included within this natural resources inventory. So this represents a puzzle piece for the region that starts to fill in information that was available but had not been compiled in a format that made it really usable in any certain way. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, as a portion of the development of the natural resources inventory, there was an outreach where we developed a survey that was sent out and advertised to residents of the community. And I wanted to point out a couple of things. This was one of the first questions that was presented within this survey, and it's seeking what people really think about and what they want from the natural resources in the town. So if you look at these percentages, what you'll see is that the top four kind of recognized benefits are, number one was inhibiting development and sprawl. So residents within the town see it as an opportunity to maintain natural resources and maintain the nature that the town exists in now. Number two was it deals more with climate change, so removing carbon and assisting in the mitigation of global climate change. And number four kind of addresses that issue too, where having canopy cover and natural areas can help to alleviate some issues with temperatures that may occur in developed areas. And number three really addressed kind of the non-consumptive uses of habitat for wildlife. So this is kind of that intrinsic value of natural resources and what they represent to individuals of the community who may use them for recreation or bird watching or fishing, things along those lines. Next slide, please. This is another one of the questions that was on it, and it specifically is asking how important is it to individuals of the community that the town works to address the management and conservation and promote a healthy and natural environment. And I think you can see that we had 149 respondents to this survey. 73% of those respondents said it's very, very important to them, extremely important that the town takes into consideration natural resources when making decisions. So what that kind of leads to is that this document starts to allow and compile and provide the town with the ability to do this, to really start taking into account these natural resources when making decisions. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about some of the components of the natural resources inventory. I'm not going to cover all of these, but this gives you a pretty good idea of the different areas that were covered in the mapping and as well as in the text of the document. So broadly, it addresses geology, aquatic resources, habitats and wildlife, parks and open spaces, and then land cover and zoning within the town. When you start to look more specifically within some of those areas, for example, within geology, it's looking at things like bedrock and surficial geology as well as the soils. And probably kind of more importantly to the town, given some of the regulations that already exist, is it starts to map out those steep slopes that are addressed within existing town regulations. For aquatic resources, we mapped out aquifers, the watersheds, the sub-watersheds and major watersheds that occur within the town. flood hazard zones and floodplains associated with the streams that flow through town. The streams themselves, as well as the quality of the streams, as has been determined by the Department of Environmental Conservation and Wetlands. And for habitats and wildlife, we start to look at things like important biodiversity areas, streams and riparian corridor habitat that can be important for wildlife. Forests, including kind of the urban forest that really exists throughout the town. The inclusion of community science, and then ending with parks, open spaces, and the land cover and zoning. Next slide, please. So we're going to start to look a little bit at some of the maps that were developed. So what you can see here, this is an aerial overview of the town of Newcastle. That shows that kind of the faded white line that you're seeing, that's a 1 kilometer buffer surrounding the town. So every map that we developed includes resources beyond the town boundary. That kind of served two purposes. First, it was to make sure that we actually included all the resources within the mapping, because sometimes when dealing with this sort of data, if you get too close to a boundary, you can accidentally cut something off and remove it when really it should be included. But it also serves to kind of show that these resources go beyond the town boundaries. So, for example, some of the wetlands that we're going to see in later maps extend beyond the town boundaries into other municipalities. So it starts to get at this idea of there may need to be cooperation and collaboration between municipalities to address some of these concerns. Next slide, please. Now, if we begin to take that aerial photography and break it down into different components, what you end up with is these kind of more broad maps that basically these things like forests and wetlands are turned into shapes on a map, and they are georeferenced. So we're basically working, when this data is developed, you're essentially working from either on-the-ground data or aerial photography and breaking it down into these individual components. This map represents a base map that is going to serve as the base of every single map that is included in the natural resources inventory. And it's meant to just kind of generalize some of the areas. So it's got things like all the open parks and open spaces that occur within the town, as well as some of the major aquatic resources, the major streams, the wetlands, and larger water bodies that are present within them. Next slide, please. This is a map of the wetlands that were mapped within the town, and as you can tell, just by looking at this, wetlands are relatively abundant throughout the town. And this includes 21 New York State regulated wetlands, so these are wetlands protected by state regulations. And those wetlands totaling almost 849 acres within this area. Next slide, please. So in this map, which is another one of the aquatic resource maps that's included in the natural resources inventory, what you're seeing is aquatic resources, some major streams, as well as water bodies, and it represents the consolidated assessment listing method that is completed by the Department of Environmental Conservation, with water bodies and streams listed and shown by kind of a measure of impairment. Next slide, please. As I said, this is just this isn't going to include all these maps. This presentation doesn't include all the maps. Largely, we're covering the ones that are printed and they're going to be available for display that are on the walls. So this next map represents the known locations of culverts, stormwater outfalls, and dams, as well as streams within the town. And on the large printed map behind me, I've actually combined the previous map with this one. And I think it kind of illustrates the idea that when you have things like a lot of stormwater outfalls going in the stream, you can start to get an idea of why some impairments may be occurring. And in fact, the DEC fact sheets for the assessed streams identified list urban stormwater inputs as a primary stressor for a lot of these streams and water bodies. So by knowing where these occur, it allows communities to start to potentially address some of those issues that may be occurring because of the locations of stormwater outfall. So this can include things like starting to put in green infrastructure, so rain gardens, and other green infrastructure that captures water and allows it to filter through something prior to entering the stream. So when looking at this, you can start to get an idea of some areas where some of that may be able to occur. Next map, please. On this map, what you're seeing is the estimated canopy cover. So this is tree cover throughout the town. In 2016, that's the most recent data available for the town. Canopy cover, total canopy cover was estimated about 67.3% of the town. And there's been only about since 2011 that represents about a 0.5% decrease in the total amount of canopy cover. So not a major decrease, and actually somewhat surprising given that Hurricane Sandy came through in 2012. But this is potentially going to be an important metric to keep tracking over time, because what we're starting to see now is a lot of tree diseases that are starting to enter some areas. So these are things like emerald ash borer, beech leaf disease, that you may actually start to see a drop in canopy cover. And that's not necessarily going to represent something like, oh, we've got more development, there's canopy cover loss. No, this is just going to be naturally occurring loss of canopy cover that could be tracked over time. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about the wildlife here. This is data from the New York Natural Heritage Program, and it represents some potentially important biodiversity areas that intersect the town boundaries. So these areas are considered areas of importance for sustaining or potentially sustaining rare species that occur within the state of New York. And they also may represent some opportunities for increased conservation planning and zoning considerations to kind of minimize impacts within these areas where these species may occur within town boundaries, as well as maintaining important habitat connectivity to support wildlife movement and long-term survival of populations within the town and within the region. Next slide, please. This is a map that is developed from the National Land Cover Database dataset. So the National Land Cover Database dataset is a kind of aggregate government program where they use aerial imagery to track land cover over time based on the aerial imagery, and it's periodically updated to not just represent potential changes in land cover over time, but to also incorporate updates to the technology that's used to develop maps, which actually increases the accuracy of the database over time. There's a lot going on there, but I'm going to throw a couple numbers here at you really quickly. So what you're seeing in the pink and red, that's about 39.1% of the town. That's what this database considers developed areas. So that's going to include both residential, low density, as well as higher density, as well as kind of the downtown areas that would be depicted in red. Another number, though, is the amount of forest. So canopy cover was about 63%, I believe, 67% rather. Forest cover within the town in areas that are just considered deciduous or coniferous forest is almost 54% of the town. So you can see that there's despite development, there's still a lot of habitat that's being maintained and has been maintained over time. One thing to note when you're looking at this is you see the town boundaries, and to the north going into Mount Kisco and the south going into the Austin area, you see a lot more heavy development. So in terms of maintaining that integrity of the habitats, Newcastle is actually doing quite a good job in terms of maintaining the integrity of that urban forest kind of habitat and that deciduous forest habitat, particularly relative to some of the surrounding communities that may have more density and more development kind of abutting the borders of the town of Newcastle. And next slide, please. This is the last map I'm going to talk about. There are about 20 maps in the document. This represents a small portion of them. But this is the parks and open spaces. And some of this information is already detailed in town documents, but currently there's roughly 549 acres of developed parklands and open spaces within the town. And kind of something that comes out of this when looking at the habitats, the canopy cover, where things lie. There, if practicable, the town can start actually actively seeking to kind of expand some of these properties in areas where there's not already development surrounding them to provide more opportunities for recreation, but also more opportunities for protecting the habitat and protecting the nature of the town as it exists now. Next slide, please. So that was a lot of information I threw at you. There's a lot more information in the document itself. But now I want to talk a little bit about how this document can actually be used by the town in future endeavors. So there's going to be both regulatory and non-regulatory tools that are applicable related to this document. Non-regulatory tools can include things like non-binding designations, land acquisitions by the town, land management, so actively managing properties within the town to maintain the integrity, and educational programming and community events. Next slide, please. And with that last point, that those educational opportunities. This was another one of those questions. So part of the document addresses community science and community science data that's already available, but we wanted to specifically get an idea of what residents thought about participating in some of these community science events. And what we actually found from before this question had 146 of 149 individuals responded to it. 64% or 93 of those respondents indicate a strong interest in community-led science programs. And the NRI can actually be used to address the areas of that programming. So this can be things as simple as like a nature walk, but it could also be things like tree plantings, invasive species management, tracking wildlife in the town. And you can really go a lot of directions. And just based on this, there seems to be a strong interest from the community in that sort of programming and that involvement. Next slide, please. There's also regulatory tools, so these are going to be things like the zoning, local ordinances, local wetland ordinances, and other mechanisms that can be used by the town. The town already has a number of regulations and zoning ordinances on the books that protect and provide certain protections to natural resources that are occurring within the town. Next slide, please. But when we start to look at the responses from the community, we can looking at that top left graph, which is talking about how well individuals mixing up my words here. Yeah, it was asking about whether or not individuals thought the town should actually do more to start protecting natural resources. And you can see that almost 82% of respondents either strongly agree or agree with that sentiment that the town should actually be doing more to protect natural resources that occur within the town boundaries. When we look at those other graphs, you can see similar sentiments. So these are different questions. So one of the existing town regulations deals with buffers surrounding wetlands and streams and water bodies. So there seems to be some agreement that those buffers may warrant expanding beyond their current beyond the current buffer width. There was also some sentiment and support, pretty good support, almost 60% for starting to include some other areas within those buffer requirements. So these are things like forests and meadows, and other habitats not currently included in those buffer areas, to start providing protections for those areas as well. And also pretty strong support that the town should actually start to do more to protect these resources. I accidentally put the same graph on there twice. I apologize for that. So you can see that there, in general, from the responses that we got from the town, there is a strong support for maintaining and protecting the natural resources that occur within the town. And this document can start addressing some of those concerns and provide support for coming up with new solutions to accomplish some of those goals. Next slide, please. So, based on existing regulations as well as responses from the town and just becoming more familiar with some of the town residents through this process, it's very clear to me that both the town as well as the residents have made the protection of natural resources a priority for the town, or they feel that it should be a priority for the town. Harmony with nature is critical not only for maintaining the natural feel and bucolic nature of the town, but it also starts to provide protection for those wildlife and those habitats that already occur within the town. It can protect and improve water quality. So kind of thinking back to that water, the map that was depicting the impairment of water bodies. You can start to improve and protect some of those areas. It can also aid in ensuring sustainability and resilience of the town and natural environments into the future, particularly with in the eye of climate change starting to become a factor and impacting habitats and wildlife. So in with the adoption of this NRI, it's going to serve as a primary step in the town's continuing efforts to identify natural resources within the town, and supports future goals for the town that can include management and expansion of parks and open spaces. And I'm actually realizing that was the graph that I accidentally left off. There was strong support for within the community survey to expand the parks and open spaces. The development of a town-wide biodiversity and habitat management plan, as well as guiding future zoning development while protecting natural resources. With incorporation into regular planning across town departments, the NRI can begin to serve as a foundation for an evolving natural resources preservation, conservation, and management strategy that will support and maintain the long-term sustainability of the town of Newcastle's diverse and abundant natural resources. And that's how I'd like to conclude. And if we can go to the next slide, I think Dennis and I would be happy to field any questions that anybody might have. And this is actually a picture from Whippoorwill Park that I took when I was in town in September. So was glad to be able to include that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, this is a lot of work and very interesting. I think we're all gonna read this entire report, but thank you, this was quite interesting and something I know we're gonna utilize going forward.
So you mentioned percentage of the town that is tree canopy and then what that looks like now versus 10 years ago, and then the effects of hurricanes. Just curious, like thinking about where that decline, the decline from, for example, disease, whether it's the beech disease or I guess Dutch elm, which I didn't hear you mention, but other diseases. Does that typically hit the canopy in individual owned lots or in larger preserve type areas? Where would you see that typically be the bigger issue?
Oftentimes it's gonna start in one area and just start to spread. So things like emerald ash borer, you would have had your first notification in, say, the town or the county, oh, it's been spotted, and it's gonna spread out from that location. One of the maps that's included in there has community data from the PRISM program, which is kind of a community-based tracking of invasive species that included some of the diseases. So that map had a couple of locations where some of these diseases had been noted. But in general, it's just gonna be it's just gonna spread from a point is often what you see with a lot of these diseases and pests. Things like emerald ash borer, just looking at the aerial imagery as I was reviewing it, lots of times you're gonna be seeing that in the opening of canopies above forested wetlands, because a lot of those wetlands would have had ash trees in them. And all of a sudden, if you compare aerial from 10 years ago to now, what you're going to see is that canopy has opened up, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. You've still got a forested wetland. It's still going to function as a forested wetland and provide the habitat that it was providing before. It's just got an open canopy now that is likely going to fill in eventually in the future with other species. But it's open because once emerald ash borer hits, it tends to strike that area really fast, and a lot of those trees are going to die basically at the same time.
Thank you.
I'm curious about one of the survey results that you have from residents who would like to see us expand open spaces or the amount of open space. And I just wonder what you've seen in terms of how to do that practically.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question? I just wanted to
Yeah,
pull up
if-
the graph.
Yeah, if I heard you correctly, one of the survey results showed that residents would like us to make more efforts to expand the amount of open space.
Yeah,
Correct.
so
I'm just wondering from a practical standpoint, if you have advice for us on how to do that, what are the different ways to expand?
some of it's going to be, even if it's not expanding that area, it's gonna be providing a buffer around that area. So essentially what you're gonna be doing is protecting that immediate area from development right up to the edge. I think that likely what this document can also do is it's valuable in many ways, but one of the ways that it can be used is to support future grant funding opportunities that may become available through the state or even federally, where you can use this data, which the digital data I've provided it to Dennis and the town, can actually be used to kind of narrow in on areas of, like Dennis was alluding to, you can start to look at, say, a park, and then around that park you can start to say, okay, where do we have high forest canopy, where do we have wetlands, where do we have streams that we want to protect, and narrow into that area, and from there start to identify potentially properties or portions of properties that may be good to place either an easement on or attempt to purchase surrounding parks to expand those areas.
And that
So-
ties in very well with our open space fund that we just adopted.
Exactly, yes, yes.
Right, and it's funny, cause it probably would be good, to define that, cause to me, like, open space is just, it becomes ambiguous, but I think to mention, obviously, like updating of that, Parks and Rec and Parks Master Plan, I think that would be in companion with this, because you want to, not confuse someone who's looking for another soccer field. That would be kind of not really what this is about, Right, but to Nick's point, if there is an existing soccer field and, there is an opportunity to provide a buffer because X number of feet away from said soccer field is, maybe a resource that is worth protecting, well, in that case, it's just me not necessarily acquiring, but it's like an augmentation or restoration, to sort of provide that buffering, and still have companion usage, which I guess is obviously the goal, because we all share the planet, so that's kind of the way it works at the end of the day. But yeah, I think the key is we, and we try this, as Chris knows, at conservation board meetings, there's even like a vetting of this. It's like, well, what do you mean by open space, and how would we advance, and please define, and so it's a fair
Right.
question, absolutely.
And also,
Thanks, Dennis.
it occurs to me, in line with results regarding community-led science programs, it would be great to share this with the school district, because they have a great new sustainability center that was made possible by a really generous grant from an alumni, and so it would just be, I know that we have plans to put this on the website, but it would be great to maybe partner with them and share information for programming.
So we do have extra copies. I obviously was going to the library. I was gonna ask, if it was okay, Jill's permission that, am I allowed to provide, copies to some of the schools for their libraries as well, because I think it's worth it to spread this in hard copy form, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But also, we're putting it on the website too,
Yes,
so,
yes,
yeah.
and it'll be in the
I'm not that old,
newsletter as
I know
well.
what that is.
Yes, exactly. I know you know.
And
I'm
that's
just
where
saying so people know that we're.
Thanks, Dennis.
Of course.
this kind of becomes more valuable in that, because if you're talking about trying to reach out to school groups, we're at, certainly providing them with this document can help, but it can also help the town in identifying specific areas where it might be very nice to get those groups involved. If there's specific goals or projects that the town wants to address or start to work towards, you can get those groups involved with, hey, we've got this wetland area that, we want to work on protecting or cleaning up a little bit, would you be interested in being involved with that effort? Or we want to monitor this pond for frogs because we heard something cool calling there. Would you guys be interested in going to that pond or that wetland to monitor it for frogs or salamanders or whatever it might be?
Also, we have really smart high school students who could probably discover things that we don't know. So, anyway.
When you're talking about engagement and involvement of the town, you said there was 149 people, did I hear you correctly?
We had
Responded?
149 respondents to.
I'm curious, is that considered good, is that considered solid, how strong is that engagement? 'Cause the number seems low, and I'm just
yeah.
curious, is there a better mechanism, or how do we help generate more involvement in the future?
Right, so I think from August, all of August through the middle of September, we ran this weekly in the newsletter. You know, the NRI, take the survey. You know, I guess the quick knee jerk is, well, it was August.
Well, September,
You know,
right,
it's
right.
possible, and I know when everybody goes on vacation, they obviously leave their phones behind and don't go on the internet. It would be lovely if we did, but I guess this, you know, still wasn't a focus, and you know, maybe it'd be another time of the year that, you know, I think could have added. I'm not saying you would have had thousands and thousands of people, but you know, it definitely could have increased the number, so fair point.
These questions also still exist, and I think it would be possible to probably, if it was an interest in the future, disseminate them again, to try to field more responses.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it is like a work in progress, I guess, so we could do that.
Yeah, this so kind of two things about this document. One is when you start reading into some of the appendices, this document is really meant to be a broad overview for the town. If you start getting questions about somebody who's like, hey, this is on my property, it's not meant to address that level, that specificity of a question. It can help to guide further exploration of that property. So you may be able to pull up the data on, say, a wetland. So he says, I don't think there's a wetland on my property, even though it's mapped. And what this would end up doing is guiding, say, Dennis to go out and inspect it, you know, to be able to say, yes, there is, or no, there's not a wetland, or no, yes, there is a stream, no, there's not a stream. Because there certainly are inaccuracies in terms of the mapping that are just embedded in the data. So this is all geographic data similar to a GPS coordinate that you would collect, and when you collect a GPS coordinate, there's error associated with that point. That's also embedded in all this other data too. So things like the map that showed the land cover, each one of those things it's actually a small box that represents a 30 by 30 meter pixel on the landscape. So you can imagine that there's about 30 meters of error embedded within that, because it's saying the majority of that is this. There could be some other stuff. So it lacks some of that specificity where somebody on their property might say, that's not right, and they may be correct, but the data that's available without getting on the ground on that specific property or in that specific location just isn't available without being on the ground, so.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think we're gonna get a lot of use out of this, especially for grant applications as well, so I'm excited about this, thank you.
Thanks, Dennis.
All right, and, oh, we do have a copy, do we have a copy of the slide presentation, right?
Yeah,
That
we
was-
do, and we're gonna have these maps, they're gonna be around, we'll figure out where to put them so people can take and see them up
The
close.
town, yeah, so we'll-
Is there an ability to purchase a copy of the study, you know, for $25 or something?
We'll see if we can have
It's
one.
gonna be available on our website, so people can print it off if they so choose. Or not, because that's not so environmentally friendly, but they can also look at it online. All
Thank
right,
you all very much.
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank
Really appreciate it. All right, so we are going to turn now to public comment and new business.
The senior tax
All right.
booklet,
Ah.
can we just touch on that before we, it
Yes, we can.
was a late
This
edition.
one.
Yes,
So just very briefly, I can explain what it is.
Senior exemption local law.
Yep, so last week at your workshop board, John Herman, the town assessor, was here and told you about a state statute that raised the maximum eligibility for the senior real property tax exemption. It now goes from $29,000 to $50,000. Now that's a state law, and municipalities can opt to raise their local exemptions as well. And last week, the board indicated that it wanted to do that, and the local law that we've drafted essentially does that. Section 1 of the law explains the purpose and why we're doing this. Section 2 is actually the numbers, the guts of it. And what we're doing, there is a section of the town code that over the years, and this goes back to the 1980s, has been amended many times as the maximum income eligibility numbers have changed from the state. And all of that historical data is there, but it's no longer, it's all obsolete. I spoke to Josh about this, there's never any occasion to go back and look at what the exemption numbers were in the 1980s. So we're gonna take all that out and just go with the current exemption numbers. That'll be in section 116.2 of the town code, and along with the sliding scale, and all those numbers are provided in the draft local law.
Alright, thank you. And we're gonna be setting a public hearing to consider that local law tonight.
Yes.
Alright, so now we are moving on to public comment, new business. Is there anyone here who has a public comment or new business? Alright, is there anyone online? John Garfunkel.
Hello, Lisa.
Yeah.
Lisa, thank you.
Hi, what's up?
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. Now you
Yes,
just,
thank you, Dennis, mad scientist, for putting it together. I did have one follow-up question about the NRI inventory report. Reviewing the open spaces slide, and I learned from Dennis, those are sourced from the county. And there are several areas, just looking around where I live, in Hill, that are either not marked or miscategorized. And there's nothing on the map covering easements that would cover that. So I'm wondering, is there a process that the town would work with the county planning office to update that map, the data in that map? Is there a process for
We'll
that?
look into it.
so we will look into that. Dennis and Dr. Smeek had actually left the building. But we will certainly bring that question up to them and look into if that's appropriate.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Anyone else online? Okay, so with no other public comment, then I think we're gonna move to resolutions.
There's just one question I had for the board. On the consent agenda, there is the authorization to approve the contract with CVAC for basic life support services. I had sent the board an email. Are there any questions on that? Okay, then
Thank you.
please proceed with the consent agenda.
Alright, so is there anything in the consent agenda that any town board member would like to take out? Alright, so we can start with the resolutions. Ally, do you have them over there?
Have you explained to Ally the process and reasons why someone would take something out of the consent agenda? I remember when I joined the board that was like usually said, but I never understood what it meant.
So I think did Ed, have you done that?
I don't think we covered that.
Never covered.
I was remiss. So
Holly,
let's do that right.
Holly should probably listen to this too.
What a wonderful opportunity this is.
So the
It's a learning
consent
moment.
agenda is what, about 1 to 2 years old at this point? And it's a way to expedite getting through resolutions that are very routine in nature and there aren't a lot of whereas or any whereas clauses, there's not a lot of reading to do, and we take them instead of individually, as we did in the past, just as a group. So all you do is read the description
Okay.
in the consent agenda, and then there's one motion to approve them all at once. It's a batch.
safe path.
And
So-
the reason why someone would say don't want it in there is
Thank you.
because.
So if there's something that you thought should be called out and deserved to be read separately from the others, that it was it's hard to think of
So
examples.
for instance, I've taken things out when we've hired someone new or we've appointed people to committees. I felt like those should be called out, or if somebody retired, we made sure we wanted to recognize them individually.
A sizable purchase.
Also you might wanna take something out if you know that not everyone will vote the same way.
Correct.
So we try to identify which ones should be in the consent agenda, but from time to time, one will slip in there that a board member will say, nope, let's pull that one out and give that one a separate read.
So that's why we always ask. Usually we've caught them before, but we always ask just in case.
No, we're on the subject, on the resolutions themselves, I'm gonna suggest that the board just read the number of the resolution as opposed to the title of the resolution, because I've noticed at the last meeting in particular that some of the titles got kinda long and then
And it's redundant.
ran into,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. I move to adopt the consent agenda as submitted, consisting of the following: adoption of minutes, November 2022, adoption of monthly reports, November 2022, authorization to obtain survey and appraisal services, MNRR, authorization to declare surplus and to auction recreation senior bus, authorization to accept easements and other agreements from NCFD number 1, authorization to approve 2022-2023 NCCMC contract, authorization to approve contract with CVAC for basic life support ambulance services.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to adopt resolution number 1 to approve the payment of claims in the amount of $800,099.49 listed on the $845,099.49, listed on the summary pre-check writing report and detailed voucher detail report, both dated December 12th, 2022. Checks will be printed and distributed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, December 14th, 2022. I move,
Wait, Chris, can I have a
Nah, there's
second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to adopt resolution number 2 to authorize the hiring of Daniel McGarry for the position of Recreation Supervisor 0265-01 within the Recreation and Parks Department at the annual salary of $71,233.12. Group 9, Step 2, effective December 27th, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Sorry.
No, we can have someone else. We usually do it by page.
Yeah, it's a lot of pages.
Do you have it in front of you?
Yeah, I have it here. We're on
3.
Yeah, I got it. Resolution number 3, I move to authorize the hiring of Jacob Day to the position of laborer within the Recreation and Parks Department at the annual salary of $48,055.31 effective January 3, 2022.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Resolution number 4, I move to authorize the hiring of Jeffrey Marmelstein at the rate of $25 per hour and Daniel Anderson at the rate of $20 per hour as recreation attendants within the Recreation and Parks Department effective December 19, 2022.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Resolution 5, I move to adopt the following resolution. Resolve the town of Newcastle Town Board hereby adopts the preliminary budget and salary schedule amended as per attached as the final budget for fiscal year 2023. And be it further resolved that the 2023 final budget for the general and highway funds set forth a total tax levy of $17,376,586. And be it further resolved that the 2023 final budget for the solid waste district renews the annual dwelling unit charge of $602 per residential unit. And be it further resolved that with regard to condominium complexes with adequate refuse storage capacity as determined by the Commissioner of Public Works, the 2023 final budget for the solid waste district renews the annual dwelling unit charge of $602 per condominium residential unit for those condominiums which will remain or change to once-a-week collection. And be it further resolved that with regard to condominium complexes with limited refuse and storage capacity, as determined by the Commissioner of Public Works, the 2023 final budget for the Solid Waste District renews the annual dwelling unit charge of $361.20 per condominium residential unit for those condominiums which will remain at twice-a-week collection.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Vicky?
Okay, resolution number 6, I move to adopt the following resolution. Whereas the town controller is responsible for the orderly reporting of all finances associated with the operations of the town, and whereas in order to close the financial records for the year ending December 31, 2022, certain budget adjustments, transfers, and amendments may be required with some exceptions, and whereas this board wishes to provide the town controller with the authorization to perform all necessary budget adjustments, transfers, and amendments to produce a balanced budget for 2022. Now therefore be it resolved that the town controller is hereby authorized to make all necessary adjustments, transfers, amendments, with the exceptions to transfers from the contingency account to the 2022 operating budget, revenue and expenditure accounts required to produce a balanced budget. And further be it resolved that the town controller shall report all such adjustments, transfers, and amendments to the town board as they are made for review and ratification.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution number 7, whereas pursuant to section 467 of the real property tax law, local governments and school districts can opt to grant reduction on the amount of real property taxes paid by qualified senior citizens by reducing the taxable assessment of the senior's home by as much as 50%. And whereas on August 8, 2022, the governor signed legislation to that effect, increasing the maximum amount of income that property owners may earn for the purpose of eligibility from $29,000 to $50,000. And whereas the town board desires to amend chapter 116 of the town code to raise the income limit to $50,000 for the senior citizen property tax exemption on a sliding scale basis. And whereas the proposed action is a type 2 action pursuant to New York State SECRA and no further environmental review is required. Now therefore be it resolved that the town board schedules a public hearing on a proposed local law to amend chapter 116, section 1 and section 2 of the Code of the Town of Newcastle for Tuesday, January 24th, 2023 at the Town of Newcastle Town Hall at 7:30 p.m. or as soon thereafter as reached on the town board agenda that evening.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Jeremy?
Yep, as to resolution number 8, I move to adopt the following. Whereas the town of Newcastle engaged a mad scientist, the consultant, to work collectively with town staff and others to prepare a natural resource inventory of NRI to assist the town and public in identifying and understanding important natural resources located within the town of Newcastle. Whereas NRI and the consultant prepared many maps displaying, among other things, water, wetlands, geological and ecological information and resources, as well as recommendations. Whereas the purpose of the NRI is to provide a foundation for comprehensive land use and conservation planning and supporting the inclusion of natural resources and zoning, among other things. Whereas NRI also provided information that can be used to designate critical environmental areas, develop and implement a municipal open space plan, and amend existing zoning and subdivision regulations, among other things. And whereas the NRI will also enable the town to identify priorities for natural resources protection and to explore community-supported tools and techniques for conserving and expanding these resources. Whereas the NRI, as completed will be on the town's website. Whereas pursuant to 6 New York CRR 617.5 C27, the adoption of the NRI is a type 2 action pursuant to SECRA. As such, no further action is required. Now therefore be resolved, the town board hereby approves the adoption of 2022 NRI, and be it further resolved that the town board encourages use of the NRI as a reference tool by the town's statutory and advisory boards. Be it further resolved that the town clerk is requested to upload this resolution and the NRI to the town's website and provide a copy of this resolution and website link to members of the Town of Newcastle Planning Board, among other boards, both in the county and in the town, and ending with the Westchester County Department of Planning.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
As to resolution number 9, I move to authorize the payment of vacation days for non-union staff for the following individuals for a total payout amount of $15,426,031 as reflected below.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We also have the airport resolution, if someone wants to read that with the changes.
Say what, Bill?
And this other one with the
Oh.
names of people.
The salary? Alright. Okay. I will read the, wow, these are doozies, Ed. I like Jeremy's among other things, that's a good way to do it. Okay, so this is a resolution regarding the Bond Act, the Environmental Bond Act. I move to adopt the following resolution, whereas the town board passed a resolution on October 25, 2022, stating their support for the passage of the Environmental Bond Act to improve Westchester's environment. Whereas the Board of Legislators passed a resolution at the request of the Executive Office stating their support. Whereas the Clean Water, Clean Air and Green Jobs Bond Act, the first bond act in over 20 years, was passed by New York State as part of the budget approved by voters. Whereas the Clean Water, Clean Air and Green Jobs Bond Act furthers the goals set forth by the town of Newcastle in its 2017 resolution supporting the Paris Agreement. Its commitment to meaningful reductions of greenhouse gas emissions, provides for the use of $4.2 billion to better prepare the state for natural disasters caused by climate change. Whereas the county airport is located next to the Kensico Reservoir, which is a key collecting point for upstate reservoirs and safe drinking water for residents of New York City and the county. Whereas the Kensico Reservoir is an irreplaceable asset to the region and critical component of water infrastructure and clean water reserves that the Bond Act seeks to protect. Whereas the County Board of Legislators also passed a resolution and reaffirmed it in 2020, which acknowledges that any expansion of the county airport's physical capacity or impact could add both air and water pollution that would negatively affect the reservoir and our region, and declares that the policy of the Board of Legislators is to limit the development of the airport to its current physical capacity to preserve the environment. Whereas Westchester County Airport is the third busiest airport in New York State and provides convenience to the public and businesses as well as economic benefits. Whereas the operation of the airport has negative impact on the regional environment, including but not limited to the generation of significant greenhouse gas emissions, especially the outsized generation of such emissions from private aviation operations. Whereas the county is currently engaged in the process of updating the master plan, which will set forth, among other issues, the goals and guidelines for operating the airport in the future. Now therefore be it resolved, the town board encourages Westchester County to pursue grant opportunities that may become available under the Bond Act to mitigate and eliminate adverse environmental impacts associated with the operation of the county airport. And further resolved, that the town board believes that any expansion of airport operations would run counter to the goals of the Bond Act and urges Westchester County and the Westchester County Board of Legislators to prevent any expansion of airport operations both as part of the creation of the updated Westchester County Airport Master Plan and through all other reasonable legal or other means at their disposal.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You wanna do that one?
Read all of them?
You shouldn't do that one. Last one is this one.
Okay, you can just say yes.
Okay. I move to approve following salary adjustments effective January 1, 2022 as set forth below.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes. Okay, are there any other resolutions?
I don't think so.
Okay, so before we adjourn, before I entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting, I just wanted to once again say thank you to Chris Hildebrand. It is your last meeting. And again, as I said earlier, when we had a little farewell reception for you, that the town is much better for having had you serve as its councilman, and we will forever be grateful to you.
Thank you.
So thank you so
Very
much.
I appreciate that. I just wanted to say one quick thing, which is thank you to town staff. You know, I've seen firsthand how hard you all work to keep our town running smoothly. It's a beautiful town. I was so proud and honored to serve it, but I was even more proud to work with you. So thank you for everything you do every day to make our town thrive. Appreciate that.
All right, here, here. All right, well, sadly, we are now going to adjourn our last meeting of 2022. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Oh, goodness.